Well, one thing that I see, and I want to bring it up into what you guys are doing, I see that, especially with General Motors this week. I mean, what do you call this? General Motors gets, I think they made off with like $22 billion after it was all said and done with the bailout, and then stock, CEO bonuses and all that. I mean, before these job losses, the taxpayer lost billions of dollars on this, and then they're laying off all these people, saying we want to do, more automated cars and electric cars. What a novel concept! Maybe train these workers to do that because the cars aren't going to make themselves. But it's all, investors were very happy because they just look at the dead carcass of the middle class as an opportunity for them. So I wanted to ask you. It seems like between the Richard Ojeda types in West Virginia, obviously the people that voted for Donald Trump and seeing these layoffs and the plants aren't coming back might be opening up to, well, maybe this man isn't exactly a populist savior. It seems like there could be a resurgence of labor if the right messaging and the right leaders come along. And I know MPP is doing that. You guys have gotten galvanized and kind of synergized with a lot of labor leaders to try and basically create this new party.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing that we've taken on number one and that we've found most successful kind of as our highest priorities, that we believe that building a major new party is going to be a collaboration between labor and between social movements and the progressive movement. And it's that kind of collaboration that we're building right now with a campaign called the Labor Community Campaign. And that's a dozen progressive organizations across the country and also more than 700 labor leaders and activists who've come together into this coalition and have said that the time is now, the time that we need to start laying the groundwork for a major new labor-based party. The United States is actually internationally unique among Western countries of not having a labor-based party. The Democratic Party has long since traded its New Deal alliance with labor for a partnership with corporations. And so what we're aiming to do is really unprecedented, and it is bringing together, it hasn't been done ever since the 30s, really, in bringing together social movements and labor for a major new party. And we have some incredible support for that. We have, on the progressive side, we have Chris Hedges, who's come out as an endorser, Cornel West as well, Jimmy Dore. Would love to have your support, Jordan. Abby Martin just endorsed us as well and covered us recently on her podcast. And on the labor side, really exciting, we have former members of the AFL-CIO Executive Council, current members as well, Baldemar Velasquez, who is also the head of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, 23,000-member Latino union in the Midwest in North Carolina, which endorsed us just a couple of weeks ago. We're very excited about that. And on top of that, other labor leaders like Nancy Woolforth, the head of Pride at Work, former AFL-CIO Executive Council member as well, Al Rojas, who's a co-founder of United Farm Workers of America, and Donna DeWitt, who's the former head of the AFL-CIO in South Carolina, the state president. So there's some really prominent labor figures who are getting behind the call for a major new party, and we're really glad to be making this unprecedented progress because we think that it's a sign of the times. It's a reflection of the fact that just like labor is getting more active in the teachers' strikes and in the Marriott strike, for example, becoming less willing to accept the status quo delivered by the Democrats and Republicans, and that's translating into a recognition of the need for a major new, genuinely progressive labor-based party.
So, with the caveat, this isn't a duck, but this is how I was in 2016 and how I am now. I don't generally endorse candidates or things just because people know what I believe. I'm progressive, but I can't really cover things fairly if I'm basically boostering for them too. However, with that said, here's where I stand, and I'd like your thoughts. I think whether it's taking over the Democratic Party or whether it's a new labor-based party, which I actually think is a great idea, I think neither one matters if we don't address the issue of the media. because to me, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on this as a Bernie veteran. I mean, I'm no longer with the Young Turks, so when I'm not traveling, I'm home, and basically there's no progressive all-day channel on, so I have no choice but MSNBC and CNN, just to see what's going on or what they're not covering. And what I see is, at the end of the day, if there aren't protest movements as much outside city halls and state legislatures and this and that, outside CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, to actually, I mean, these folks are actually accomplices to what's going on. I mean, we can't sugarcoat it anymore to say, oh, they're just out of touch, this and that. No, they're knowingly doing public relations and stenography for their corporate parents. So I'd love to know what you think, because to me, Green Party is not going to get any attention in this current media climate. MPP is going to get, grassroots attention from independent media and this and that, but you're going to be minimized as, communists or whatever by the corporate media. So my point, going into 2020, but bigger picture, what do you do about that? Because that, to me, is really the crux of it. If you have a media elite that the majority consider to be paper of record and the standard bearer for news, it's kind of a brainwashing of the populace.
It is, but at the same time, their power has greatly eroded. Thanks to the internet, as thanks to we're able to broadcast now. People can watch us, will be watching us, as a result of the fact that we have new technologies that have literally eroded their power to concentrate, power and to act as gatekeepers. The Bernie campaign was entirely a product of the internet, from its fundraising model, small dollar donations, no big donations, the same thing that we do as MPP, and also the organizing model, distributed organizing model, entirely internet-based, and the same thing in terms of getting through to people and spreading the word, largely on social media, and independent media as well. That's how it began. And so the new technologies, in particular the internet, have empowered that kind of breakthrough the traditional gatekeepers of politics. And in fact, and also I would say that there comes a point when people's frustration with a political system, a stagnant political system, one that has basically betrayed them, political parties that have betrayed them, neoliberal parties for years, decades, is that you get what is happening across Europe, and you get what is happening across Latin America now. And that those deeply entrenched parties that have ruled their countries for decades are essentially being challenged, replaced, displaced by major new parties, both on the left and the right. And so that desire for change, as people flood out of the establishment parties, is manifesting in that. And in those countries, like you saw in Mexico, for example, where López Obrador was elected this July, and also on the left. And then you see the same thing happening on the right in Brazil, where Jair Bolsonaro was elected just about a month ago. And in both of those cases, the traditional media, or a big segments of it, was very much against those candidates, and yet they basically plowed through that and obliterated that opposition on social media. And they obliterated that opposition through other means of getting through. In Brazil, it was WhatsApp. WhatsApp is very popular over there. And so it's kind of like a balance, and the media's ability to chokehold information and control the narrative is great, but it has limits. People's frustration begins to slowly outweigh that. And the same thing applies to campaign finance. People's frustration slowly begins to outweigh that. In Brazil, a really scary fact, I thought, was that Jair Bolsonaro won by spending about 4% of what his competitor did in the Workers' Party. And so that's just astonishing. But that is the kind of dynamic that you get when people really reach kind of the breaking point with their level of politics. And that I agree with Glenn Greenwald when he said that is the kind of thing that we're approaching in the United States, essentially. It's just happening on a more gradual trajectory. And
to cynics that might say, I like your ideals, but what's the path forward for a movement, for a People's Party? Obviously, you have the Green Party, you have other third parties. I don't know if you have ambitions to get a candidate on the ballot in 2020, but what is the path forward, whether it be getting signature politicians to sign on, and then obviously ballot access and all that?
Yeah, it's multi-pronged. With the labor community campaign, there's two major planks, two major kind of twin intertwining goals. The first one is to run labor community candidates beginning in 2019, going into 2020, mostly as independents in municipalities, where there's advantages to doing that, and you can begin to build up kind of a bench of candidates. And then also it is to encourage the formation of a larger Labor Party advocates type organization that precedes the Labor Party among the trade unions. And so those are the big goals there as well. Learning the lessons from the Republican Party when the Republican Party replaced the Whig Party. Something that is important as well is being able to pull away politicians and staff and people with professional knowledge from the existing establishment parties. And so that is another thing that I think that is important. Tim Canova represents someone like that. He left the Democratic Party, and so there are others who we would like to do that, and so that'll all be a part of, kind of the next steps going forward.